Nations around the world have been taking advantage of America, whereas we have a huge trade imbalance where we are purchasing far more of their goods than they are of ours. If we have foreign vehicles all over our streets, they should have our vehicles all over their streets. That is indeed the mindset of Trump and many of his supporters. But is it realistic? Or is it a fairy tale? I want to run this by you folks because just today, Trump has announced a 90-day suspension in many of his tariffs that were imposed on essentially the entire planet. We're not even saying the free world anymore because even a lot of developing and third world countries like Ethiopia were receiving tariffs from President Trump. And face it, many did not understand it. But I want to run it by you folks. Do you believe that what Trump is doing will ultimately result in a financial windfall for America? Or could it lead to our detriment? Now, make no mistake about it. Make no mistake about it. That is Kamala Harris. She had something to say, and I want to hear from you folks whether you believe she was literally telling a lie.
Trump's plans for the economy would accelerate inflation and invite a recession by the middle of next year. Increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. Increase inflation and invite a recession by the middle of next year. A recession by the middle of next year. To a recession by the middle of next year. Recession by the middle.
Now those are many clips. She said this over and over again. In addition to her alleged cackle or her not answering questions, this is one she stuck with over and over again. But was she lying? Or was she on to something? Was she full of shit? Or could we see Kamala Harris in a theater near you performing an episode of I Told You So? Now, she stated by the middle of next year. So we're talking 2025. This is the year. When the hell does the middle of this year begin? But keep in mind with Trump's suspension now, 90 days, it being early April. So what is 90 days? The 7th month, so sometime in early July, if those tariffs are reinstalled in early July, you can expect the market once again to reflect the change. But I want to ask you folks, as I stated, do you believe that Trump tariffs will ultimately be good for America? Now, make no mistake about it, a hell of a lot of Americans have suffered some severe financial damage from what has happened already. We can discuss whether that will bounce back and how long it may or may not take. Keep in mind, there's a lot of Americans that are close to retirement. There's a hell of a lot of Americans that are living check to check. Folks in either one of those categories probably do not have the time it'll take for this stuff to bounce back. Let's say you weren't planning on retiring this summer, next summer. The chance of you recouping all of your lost savings between this summer or even next summer probably is nil. You're probably going to have to retire with less. Hopefully, the Trump administration figures it out, but I don't think any analyst has predicted all of this loss will come back that quickly. Also, keep in mind the tariffs that Trump imposed on China, he's not suspending those, he's increasing them. He's at over 120% in regards to the tariff on China. I think 124% now. And because China has promised to not give in, they stated they will fight to the death. You can expect Trump and his ego to keep going up as well. So for the most part, between China and the United States, essentially the trade is going to be over with until they figure this shit out. Because if goods coming in America from China are suddenly double or triple in price, ain't nobody gonna buy that shit. And the same thing going over there. So he has essentially ended, at least temporarily, any type of trade back and forth with China because it's going to make the products unaffordable. Many folks might suggest that's a good thing. We need to rein China in and get things under control. But what about doing it incrementally? Considering how much shit in this country is made in China, can you make that change overnight and have it absorbed by the finances of the American people? If all of a sudden everything going to Walmart and a hell of a lot of their stuff is made in China, if all of a sudden their entire stock, or at least a large portion of it, damn near doubled in price, is America prepared to handle that? Currently, there's no alternative. There is no alternative to all of this Chinese-made shit other than to purchase American and still pay a lot more money. The Trump administration hasn't done anything to ensure the finances of Americans has increased. So what do you do in the interim? If all of a sudden, based on your current income, the price of goods just jumped by 60, 70, 80%, how long could you handle that? How long could you deal with that misery? That is indeed what we're facing. And that's in addition to the fact that a lot of folks' savings have been greatly reduced. And when you're talking about federal employees, they're unemployed. A lot of federal employees are unemployed. So some folks are getting double, if not triple whammies, where you may have lost your job and the shit you need to survive has went up substantially. How long can the American population handle that? Because it does not seem like China's going to back down. Now, I want to point this out because a hell of a lot of Americans do believe that Trump will ultimately win a trade war with China. I'm going to submit to you that some places, some countries, some people operate more on principle than the actual results. In other words, some people will chop off their nose to spite their face. Keep in mind, we have very strong sanctions against Iran, Cuba, Russia for a time, North Korea. They're not caving. They would rather live in poverty than cave to the demands of America. China has not been a developed country for very long. So the notion that China is going to cave to the wishes of Trump and, adjust to his trade requirements, don't be so certain of that. As I just pointed out, several nations have been dealing with very strong sanctions from the United States, and they have chosen to rather live in poverty than cave to the will of America. If China does that too, that means we are suffering while we figure out an alternative. And there's very, very little likelihood that that suffering would end before the 3.5 years or so that Trump has left. It's almost certain that that's not going to end before that. In terms of bringing all the manufacturing back home and things like that, it's not going to end that quick. I don't know why anybody would believe otherwise. How many corporations have you heard promising to be built in your area? Have they broke ground on anything? It takes time to go through the entire process of building plants and all of that. The permits, the government requirements, it takes time for that. So very likely that some of the pain we're feeling now is going to expand right on through the entire Trump presidency until we see what the next person does. But let me know in the comments. I'm just curious. Do you favor what Trump is doing? Do you have the time? I'm assuming you're not about to retire and you possibly are not living check to check, because the people living check to check and the ones that are about to retire don't have the room for this huge economic swing. Let me know in the comments. As always, feel free to smash that like button. See you in the next video.